The Fellowship of the Ring is one of the best movies of all time, and I don't even like fantasy that much, to be honest, but I gotta admit, this is some of the most timeless, moving, mind-blowing imagery and storytelling ever put on film. And this iconic multi-billion-dollar franchise was created by a Christian. Yes, the original writer of the Lord of the Rings book, J.R.R. Tolkien, was a devout Catholic for all of his life, part of the famous Inklings, a group of intellectuals who regularly met and discussed writings in the 30s and 40s in England, of who C.S. Lewis was also part of. That's one of the most important Christian writers of all time. And J.R.R. Tolkien was actually a huge influence on him converting to Christianity. And Lord of the Rings is probably the most sophisticated, creative, innovative, and richest fantasy world ever created. But the values and mythology and characters in this film are really heavily inspired or influenced by Christianity. And how Christian the Lord of the Rings exactly is a topic of big discussions online and really great controversy, actually. Christians have been trying to co-opt this saga as being like a direct allegory to biblical accounts. Atheists, on the other hand, claim that there is no clear connection to Christianity because The Lord of the Rings isn't about religion. I think this discussion right here is one of the reasons why The Lord of the Rings is so great. There's nothing particular Christian on the surface, but the Christianity comes in when you look deep into the stories and the kind of worldview, the morals and the values of Lord of the Rings. Now let's talk about the first film in this trilogy, The Fellowship of the Ring. Director Peter Jackson said that he isn't a believer, but in interviews he said that he had so much respect for the source material of Tolkien that he didn't want to put in any personal messages from himself and really respect everything that Tolkien put in the text. And that also includes kind of his Catholic personality. And we can even make the case that the Christian symbolism of The Lord of the Rings is even stronger in the films because like visuals speak louder when you see them compared to when you imagine descriptions. All Christian aspects aside, what makes this a great movie trilogy and the first movie especially one of the greatest films of all time. I actually think that The Fellowship of the Ring is a rare case of a perfect film. This film was released in 2001 and the visuals look absolutely stunning. They haven't aged a day. Just each filmmaking aspect that makes up a final image, like the set design, costumes, makeup, the color grading, the lighting, the image cinematography and composition, everything is just executed with everybody being at the top of their game. And these are all great things, but what stands out to me personally the most in Lord of the Rings is this. You see, I don't usually like fantasy films. From an audiovisual point of view, they often feel like quite one-dimensional for me. I don't really like the medieval kind of aesthetic. While I do think that from a historical point of view, the medieval times were like really interesting. I don't like the visuals of it. When I see like movies with this medieval aesthetic, I kind of get this heavy, monotone feeling. I don't know if you understand what I'm talking about. Maybe some of you can relate. This is one of the reasons why I prefer science fiction, because when you have something set in the future or the present times, there are so many ways that you can explore a story visually and from a plot point of view. Now here comes The Fellowship of the Ring, because what makes this film stand out as a fantasy film for me is the editing. The scene composition and sequencing of The Fellowship of the Ring is really out of this world. This movie is probably the most perfect set of sequences of scenes that I have ever seen in a movie. There are scary moments followed by moments of naturalism and comfort, followed by more philosophical or intellectual scenes, followed by funny scenes. This movie effortlessly just switches between shocking violence and gore and to grace, to emotional fragility, like so many different things. And in comparison to like modern contemporary movies that come out today, this is truly a movie where darkness gets really dark and like light gets really bright in a visual, conceptual and emotional kind of way. This movie is able to be really big and really small at the same time. It's just masterful direction, like taking you through all these contrasts and extremes and different ends of the spectrum of what filmmaking can do, and still kind of create a cohesive kind of viewing experience of the story it's really trying to tell. Because all the visual aspects aside, and there's a lot of them we can talk about all day, but this is such an interesting and moving story that the Fellowship of the Ring and the Lord of the Rings is telling us. The story of the hobbit that leaves his comfortable home and go on the quest he was made to go on, with companionship of a set of companions that are all really different than him, in order to destroy the most powerful and tempting weapon and save the world. I mean, this is more than just a well-told hero's journey for me. This story has resonated with so many different people and cultures across time, and I do think that yes, the world building is rich and creative. Like Tolkien, he invented like whole languages, whole maps just to tell his story. But in fact, it's the human elements in the Lord of the Rings that make this so powerful. And the human elements are all based on the Bible, like in really clear and profound ways. And that's why we can certainly say that the Lord of the Rings is really Christian. The story of Gollum is a really direct and creative exploration of how sin turns humans into monsters, and how we can all, even the most despicable creatures, can get a chance to get saved by grace through faith, and that some of us in the end will still say no to the salvation that we all can get. It's a story about false prophets and how they manipulate and deceive whole nations in order to fulfill their own desires. And it's also such a brilliant exploration of what true strength is. Like Frodo is physically the weakest and the weakest warrior of the whole gang in the film, but he's the strongest at heart. And this whole focus on the inner life of what you're thinking, what you have in your heart, that's like super Christian to me. And I could go on and talk about all the biblical like parallels and things and connections to the Bible and to Christianity, but it's really all there for the viewer to explore. Like Tolkien has been really careful back in the day when talking about the Lord of the Rings as a Christian work of art, because he wanted to, because he was an artist, you know, he was a creative, he was a writer, and he wanted the audience, he had such a big respect for the creative process and for the audience, for the readers, that he just wanted them to discover the truths for themselves. And it takes an attentive viewer and reader to discover the richness of Tolkien's world, in the same way that it takes an attentive viewer to discover kind of the biblical parallels from Lord of the Rings. But it's all there, and even we don't have to get all nerdy to feel like this world has a certain substance and richness to it that all the other fantasy worlds don't have. And it's just so great to go, okay, if you like what the Lord of the Rings is telling us about good and evil, it's all taken from the source, which is the word of God. If you want to preach the gospel, please don't make art, don't make movies. Like the Lord of the Rings is a perfect example of how great Christian art should be. Having the truths of the word of God, but have it like concealed in beauty and art and creativity. Even if Peter Jackson is made the films from his own atheist point of view, the Christian DNA of Lord of the Rings is like so strong. The movies just all share a really Christian perspective, just because of how much respect Peter Jackson had for the source material. And the reason we as an audience, when we are engaged, we like want to know what's next. We want to know meaning. We love watching video essays and kind of find out the interpretation and get really deep into a story. I think we all have like a God-sized hole in our hearts that's like longing for meaning. And to me, the reason the Lord of the Rings was able to transcend all these decades was, of course, that it's just a well-written creative story and the movies are like masterpieces. But I think one of the big reasons is also that it draws back its message to the source that can actually fill the God-sized hole in each and every one of our hearts. All right, guys, this is it for today. I thank you so much for your time and attention. I wish you all a blessed day and hope to have you back in my next video.